I never thought suspicion could be triggered by something as harmless as a Tuesday morning. But that's exactly how it began, with a sentence. 7 words, delivered without hesitation, as she poured coffee into her travel mug and slipped on her blazer. I've got a doctor's appointment at 9. Lena always spoke with purpose. Not rushed, not anxious. Just clean and deliberate, the way someone sounds when they've got nothing to hide. I kissed her cheek, wished her well, and went back to checking emails at the kitchen table. Nothing about the moment felt strange. Not then. We'd been married almost 10 years. Lena was the kind of woman who kept a calendar so color-coded it looked like abstract art. Appointments, birthdays, dry cleaning, even my gym sessions, everything was plotted with robotic efficiency. So when she mentioned a doctor's appointment that hadn't shown up on the shared calendar, something didn't sit right. Still, I pushed the thought aside. Maybe she'd booked it last minute. Maybe she forgot to add it. Or maybe I was just tired from another night of tossing and turning, my mind looping the same question over and over again. What had changed? Because something had changed. Slowly, over months. The kind of slow you don't notice until you're halfway lost in it. The warmth had faded. We still talked, sure. Still slept in the same bed. Still went to the same dinner parties. But Lena had grown distant, like she was in the room, but not really with me anymore. It wasn't dramatic. Just quiet. Cool. Polite. So when she mentioned that appointment, a flicker of unease caught in my chest and didn't leave. I finished my emails and stared at the clock, 9:02. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe instinct. Maybe that gnawing sense that something was off. I opened another browser tab and typed in the name of her clinic. I still had their number saved in an old email from when I scheduled her last annual exam 2 years ago. After a few rings, a receptionist picked up. Yes, I was wondering if I could confirm an appointment for Lena Morris. She should be in this morning, around 9. Pause. Clicking on a keyboard. I'm sorry, the receptionist said. I don't see anything under that name. Are you sure it's this location? She's been going here for years, I said. We don't have any appointments for Lena Morris today or this week. I hung up, my mouth dry. The silence in the kitchen suddenly felt heavy. Lena hadn't gone to the clinic. And she had lied. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe she had the wrong date. Maybe she went to a different clinic for something minor. Maybe, just maybe, I was being paranoid. But a part of me, some deep, quiet part, whispered the same word over and over again. Why? She returned home around 12:30. I heard the car pull into the driveway, and I was already at the sink rinsing a dish I didn't need to clean. She came through the door smiling, bag on her shoulder, hair neat. Doctor was running late, she said casually, setting her keys down. Took forever, but everything's good. I looked up and nodded, the dish squeaking between my fingers. Glad to hear it. She didn't notice the way my eyes searched hers. Or maybe she did, and just didn't care. Later that night, when she showered, I took her bag from the hall bench. I opened it carefully, my hands steady. The inside was clean, wallet, lipstick, a granola bar. No pamphlets. No billing slips. No prescription notes. Nothing that suggested she'd stepped inside a clinic. I returned the bag, arranged exactly as I found it. It's strange how quickly the mind turns to darkness once doubt is planted. For days I watched her like a stranger. Her expressions, her routines. When she smiled, I studied the way her mouth moved. When she checked her phone, I memorized the frequency. She hadn't changed her passcode, but there was nothing new in her messages. Clean as a whistle. But I knew how easy it was to delete a trail. The real question was, what was she hiding? The camera came a week later. Small, discreet, disguised as a USB charger. I plugged it into the bedroom outlet near her side of the bed. It gave a clear view of her at night, and in the morning, when she dressed and did her hair. I told myself I wasn't spying. I just needed answers. Clarity. Something to tell me whether the woman I kissed each morning was still mine. The footage over the first few days was uneventful. Lena getting dressed. Lena reading in bed. Lena folding laundry. Nothing unusual. But it was what wasn't there that unnerved me. No intimacy. No affection. No small gestures. We used to laugh about nothing, steal kisses by the fridge, fall asleep touching. Now we barely grazed hands. Even when we did, it felt performative. Habitual. I thought about following her. Renting a car. Tailing her when she left the house. But I couldn't risk her noticing. So instead, I installed a tracker on her car. It was easy, magnet-mounted under the rear bumper. I paired it with an app on my phone and watched the blinking dot move through town the next day. Work, grocery store, home. Nothing strange. But Thursday changed everything. At exactly 9:14 a.m., Lena left the house, same as always. But instead of heading toward her office or usual haunts, the dot drifted toward the far edge of town, near a strip of warehouses and abandoned office parks. She stayed there for nearly 2 hours. No names were listed on the building she parked behind. Just a concrete box with boarded windows and a rusted loading dock. I watched the dot blink and blink on my phone until it moved again, this time back to town, to a cafe we'd visited once last spring. That night, she returned home with a paper bag of pastries and a smile like nothing was wrong. I passed the bakery on my way back from a meeting, she said, holding out a croissant. Thought of you. She kissed me on the cheek. My stomach turned. I excused myself early and went to bed, my mind screaming through possibilities. I didn't sleep. The next day, I called the clinic again. I know I asked this before, I said, but I just want to make sure. There's no record of Alina Morris having an appointment recently? Let me double check, the woman said. I could hear her typing. No, sir. I checked the last 30 days. Nothing under that name. Nothing. I ended the call, hands clammy, heart racing. Lena had lied to me, again. That was the moment I decided I needed more than surveillance. I needed confrontation. But I couldn't afford a simple denial. I needed undeniable proof. Something she couldn't talk her way out of. That night, as she slept, I moved silently through the house, checking drawers, her purse, coat pockets. I found it tucked in a glasses case at the back of her wardrobe. A phone. Not her regular one. A second phone. Slim. Unassuming. No case. No wallpaper. Just numbers. I powered it on. My heart slowed as the screen lit up. No password. The texts loaded quickly, dozens of them. A name I didn't recognize. And a message, time-stamped from that very morning. Same place next week? I need you again. I stared at the screen, pulse pounding. Same place? I looked up the GPS log from the tracker. The abandoned warehouse. And in that moment, everything I thought I knew about Lena shattered. The weight of the phone in my hand felt heavier than it should have. Thin, silver-edged, not even a fingerprint smudge on the screen, and yet it felt like I was holding a bomb. A quiet, ticking bomb that had already gone off. I just hadn't felt the full blast yet. I turned the device over slowly, mind numb, heart throbbing in my ears. A part of me wanted to throw it across the room, shatter the screen, make it all disappear. But instead, I sat on the edge of our bed, with Lena's slow, rhythmic breathing behind me, and scrolled through her messages. There weren't hundreds, but enough to redraw the outline of my marriage with jagged ink. Most were short. Need that again. Same spot. Last time wasn't enough. There were no names. Just a contact saved as K. No emojis, no pet names. It was utilitarian. Stark. But that somehow made it worse. There was no need for flirtation. No seduction. This wasn't emotional. It was physical. Transactional. Deliberate. The message history went back for months. The earliest ones were more cautious. Sure we're alone? And no one follows. But over time, they'd grown bolder. She didn't seem afraid. She seemed comfortable. And then I saw it. One from last week. Kay, you didn't take anything after last time? Lena, I'm still on the pill. Just in case. I felt my stomach twist. So the birth control was real. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't leftover. She was using it, just not for me. Not for us. I hadn't touched her since the night we tried and failed to reconnect 2 weeks ago. She'd pulled away, citing exhaustion, a headache, deadlines. And yet she was out there, somewhere in a forgotten corner of the city, with him. I shut off the phone, hands trembling. For a moment, I just sat there in the dark, staring at my own reflection in the black screen. Then I placed it back in the glasses case, right where I found it. I couldn't confront her yet. I didn't just want a confession. I wanted answers. I wanted the full picture. I wanted to see the truth. Feel it like a blade so I could cut the ties clean. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the quiet creaks of the house, to Lena's breath brushing the pillow beside me, and I felt more alone than I had in my entire life. Over the next 2 days, I started piecing together a timeline. I downloaded the data from the car tracker and matched it against the second phone's message history. I watched patterns emerge. Thursdays, sometimes Tuesdays, always mid-morning, always the same address. The warehouse. From the outside, It looked like it had been abandoned years ago. Dusty, cracked windows. A sagging metal roll-up door with rust stains like old blood. But the tracker confirmed it was her regular destination, and now, so did the texts. I drove out there once, around noon, long after Lena would have returned to work. I parked a block away, in a strip of broken asphalt outside a closed laundromat, and watched the building through binoculars. A single entrance. No windows in the back. Faded signage scraped clean off the walls. I noted the license plate of the only other car I'd ever seen there during her visits, a black Mercedes SUV, parked around the rear. Tinted windows. Out-of-state plates. I searched them when I got home. Registered to a Kenneth Trask. No photo, no address, just a name, and the certainty that K was no longer just an initial. He was real. He had a vehicle, and a schedule that conveniently matched hers. I didn't recognize the name. Not from her job. Not from ours. But I had ways to find out more. That night, as Lena laughed at something on her phone across the couch, I sat beside her, nodding at the television. The distance between us felt like an ocean. And yet, she was sitting right there, 5 feet away. Somewhere in her mind, she was planning her next Thursday. I hired someone the next morning. An investigator, discreet, no ties to the area, no paper trail. I didn't tell him everything. Just enough. My wife's cheating, I said, and I need photos. Names. Anything you can get. He promised me results in a week. Maybe sooner. In the meantime, I played the part of the devoted husband. I made dinner. I rubbed her shoulders when she said her neck hurt. I offered to help with errands, joked about our next vacation, and kissed her before bed. Each time, I hoped she'd flinch, or freeze, or betray herself in some small, human way. But she never did. She smiled. She leaned in. She touched my face the same way she always had. And all I could think was, how long had she been practicing this lie? On Thursday, I stayed home. I pretended I had food poisoning. Lena seemed sympathetic, but distant. She left around 8:40 a.m., wearing her navy dress and a leather satchel, saying she had a client meeting downtown. I watched her cars move on my phone. Straight to the warehouse. She stayed 2 hours. Then, as usual, she stopped at the bakery on the way home. When she walked in, she held a paper bag and smiled. "Brought you something," she said, holding out a chocolate croissant. "Figured you needed it." I took it with a shaky hand. "Thanks," I said, voice low. She kissed the top of my head, fingers brushing through my hair. That night, I got a message from the investigator. One photo. No caption. It was Lena, leaning against the passenger door of the black SUV, one hand on the side mirror. Laughing. A man stood inches from her, his hand on her waist, leaning in. Her face was turned away, but the rest was unmistakable. My stomach dropped through the floor. It wasn't just some secret fling in a dark room. This was affection, familiarity, comfort, not just sex. Worse, I didn't eat the croissant. I threw it away when she went to bed. Then I walked the house in silence, touched the walls, the furniture. I tried to imagine it all without her. Without the lies. Without the woman I thought I knew. At 2 a.m., I stood in the dark kitchen staring at the refrigerator, listening to the soft hum of the motor and the ticking clock on the wall. I had the photo. I had the texts. I had the name. But it wasn't enough. I needed to know who he was, and why Lena had gone to such lengths to keep him hidden. So I made another call. And by the end of that conversation, I knew exactly where Kenneth Trask lived, and I was going to pay him a visit. Kenneth Trask lived in a quiet cul-de-sac on the edge of town. The kind of place with new pavement, automatic sprinklers, and mailboxes that all looked identical, manufactured tranquility. His house sat at the far end, tall hedges flanking a freshly waxed black Mercedes SUV. Same plate, same tinted windows, same man who'd wrapped his arms around my wife. It was Saturday afternoon when I parked 4 houses down and waited. No clear plan, no script. Just the hot buzz of betrayal in my ears and a pressure in my chest that had settled into something cold and steady. He was home. I watched him mow his lawn. Medium build. About 6 feet. Dark hair cut clean. Confident gait. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. He looked like someone who expected the world to bend in his favor. The kind of man who didn't knock twice. The kind who met another man's wife in a deserted warehouse on a weekday morning, touched her waist, and laughed like nothing mattered. The more I watched him, the more I needed to know what he meant to Lena. If it was just lust, I might have understood. Not forgave, but understood. But this felt different. He wore the kind of smile that said she's already mine. I left just before sunset. No confrontation. Not yet. That kind of vengeance needs planning. That night, Lena curled into me in bed like she always did, head against my shoulder, lips brushing the base of my neck. I lay there with my eyes open, heart thudding in time with the fan overhead, wondering what she'd say if she knew I'd seen him, if she had any idea how close I'd been. The next morning, I called the investigator again. I want everything on Trask. His job, his routines, any ties to Lena. I want to know if this is something recent, or if I've been played for a fool for far longer than I realized. He didn't ask questions, just said, "Give me 3 days." Monday dragged like wet cloth. Lena worked late, said a project at the firm needed final adjustments, said she'd be home by 7. I watched the tracker as her car drifted right past her office and parked 15 minutes from Trask's house. She stayed there 90 minutes, then swung by the grocery store before coming home, arms full of bags and excuses. "I picked up those snacks the kids like," she said with a smile. "Figured we'd have a movie night." I nodded, took the bags from her hand, and wondered how many kisses she'd exchanged in the last 2 hours. How many lies she'd told without blinking. The kids laughed through the movie. I sat between them, Lena curled on the other side of the couch. From the outside, we must have looked perfect. Inside, I was screaming. I waited until Tuesday evening to open the investigator's report. Kenneth Trask, 41, divorced, twice, no kids, owner of a private physical therapy clinic that catered to upscale clients, athletes, executives, dancers. He wasn't from here originally, but had relocated after his second divorce. Clean record, no criminal history, no major debts. And then came the detail that stole my breath. Lena met him through her old friend Elise. Elise had introduced Lena to Trask 6 months ago when Lena had complained of lower back pain. A referral, she'd called it casually over wine once, when I asked about the receipt I'd seen in her purse for a clinic I didn't recognize. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Apparently, Elise had been a client of Trask's for years. But the investigator had dug deeper. Phone logs, surveillance, messages pulled from the cloned phone. Trask wasn't just a lover. He was part of a plan. Lena had been seeing him for months, yes. But more than that, she was helping him launch a second clinic. She'd used her marketing experience to design his brand, his website, even his patient forms. He paid her under the table, in cash. She was working for him, and she never said a word. I scrolled through the report again and again, my hands trembling. This wasn't an affair born out of impulse. This was deliberate. She'd chosen to build something with this man in secret, while coming home to me and pretending nothing had changed. That night, I made the decision. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I was going to expose her. I called Elise the next morning. Casual, friendly tone. Asked if she wanted to meet for lunch on Friday. She sounded surprised, said we hadn't spoken in months, but agreed. I didn't mention Lena. I didn't need to. I had a theory, and I wanted to test it. Friday came. Elise and I met at a quiet cafe downtown. Midway through salads and awkward small talk, I leaned in and asked, "So how long have Lena and Kenneth been a thing?" Her face blanched. What? "You heard me," I said, voice calm. She hesitated, lips parting, then closing. I didn't think you knew." "So it's true." Elise looked away, twisting her napkin. "How long?" "I don't know exactly," she whispered. She mentioned him about a year ago. I didn't think anything of it until a few months later when she started gushing about how alive he made her feel. I told her she was playing with fire. "And you never thought to warn me?" "I thought she'd come clean." I told her to. "I'm sorry." I pushed my chair back slowly. "Yeah, me too." That evening, I sat in the garage, lights off, phone in hand, staring at the photos the investigator had sent. Trask and Lena, arms around each other. Lena climbing into his SUV. The two of them outside a hotel, one I hadn't dared imagine. I didn't need more proof. I had enough. But something inside me wasn't ready to move forward. It wanted retribution. Something more than just a confrontation. I wanted her world to collapse the way mine had. And to do that, I needed a plan. Saturday morning, Lena woke up humming to herself. She danced barefoot in the kitchen, flipping pancakes while the kids chattered around the table. I watched her from the doorway. For a moment, I was struck by the contrast, how seamlessly she wore the mask. She turned and caught my eye. "Morning," she said, voice chipper. "Want coffee?" I nodded. "Rough night?" she asked. Didn't sleep well? I replied. She smiled and went back to cooking, as if nothing in her world was wrong. And that's when I knew. I wasn't going to blow up our life with a scream. I was going to take it apart, piece by piece. She lied to me with ease. I would make sure the truth ruined her slowly. And it would all begin the next Thursday. The next doctor's appointment. The Thursday air was cool, brittle with the edge of approaching winter. I stood in our driveway, coffee steaming in one hand, the other tapping lightly against my thigh. Lena emerged from the house in her slate gray coat, scarf neatly looped, hair tucked behind her ears the way she always did when she wanted to look polished but effortless. She smiled at me, that familiar upturned grin that once meant safety. Wish me luck, she said, slipping behind the wheel. For the checkup? I asked, voice neutral. Her hand paused on the ignition. Yeah, just routine. She reversed down the drive, gave a little wave, and disappeared down the street. I didn't wave back. I already knew she wasn't going to the clinic. She was going to him. The investigator's update from earlier that morning confirmed it. Trask had rescheduled all his morning patients. The black SUV was parked behind the warehouse again, just like every other Thursday. But this time, I wouldn't be observing from a screen. I was going to be there, not with threats or confrontation. No, this had to be something more devastating. Calculated. Permanent. I drove a borrowed car. A white sedan, unremarkable. Parked 3 blocks away and walked the rest. A bag slung over my shoulder, gloves tucked into my coat pocket. The warehouse looked just as it had on my last visit. Blank, faceless, forgotten by time. Except for the single unlocked side door. I slipped inside. The place smelled of concrete dust, wood rot, and stale air. But deep inside, behind an interior partition wall, I found what I was expecting. A makeshift room, tall curtain dividers, a mattress on a folding cot, an electric heater humming softly. There were clothes draped over a chair, a coffee mug half full, a folded blanket on the edge of the bed. She wasn't just visiting. She'd nested. I planted the devices quickly. One behind a box of contractor tools, another beneath the table, a third, smaller, pinhole lens disguised as a screw near the ceiling beam. The entire setup could be monitored live from my phone. I didn't plan on watching. That part I couldn't stomach. But I needed the recording. Not for blackmail. Not for gossip. For evidence. After setting everything up, I slipped out the way I came, unseen. I drove to a quiet cafe, ordered black coffee, and sat by the window staring at my reflection in the glass. It looked like me, but hollowed out. Like I'd been drained and left in the shell. My phone buzzed at 10:17 a.m. The camera app lit up. Lena. She stepped into the makeshift room and wrapped her arms around him. They kissed like old lovers, slow, practiced, familiar. She removed her coat. He touched her hip like it belonged to him. She whispered something in his ear that made him grin. I shut off the screen. Later, when I played the audio, I'd hear her laugh, soft, breathless, and say, I told him I had a physical. He's probably at work right now, none the wiser. That line was burned into my memory before I ever replayed it. Back home, I prepared the next stage of the plan. I printed screenshots, froze the video at key moments, downloaded the audio and clipped a 6-second snippet of her voice, clear and damning. All of it went into a password-protected folder. Then I copied it onto a USB drive and placed it inside a plain white envelope. Next came the email, anonymous, untraceable, to her boss, to Elise, to her parents, to Kenneth Trask's professional licensing board. Attached was a Dropbox link. Thought you should know what Lena Morris has been doing during office hours. Regards. A friend. I didn't send it. Not yet. Timing was everything. Because tomorrow was her birthday, and I had one final gift to prepare. That evening, she came home with takeout and flowers. Figured we'd celebrate early, she said, holding up the bag. I've got a client lunch tomorrow, and I know you hate crowded restaurants. How thoughtful. We sat at the table, ate our sesame chicken and spring rolls, and talked about nothing. The kids were with her sister overnight, a planned sleepover she'd suggested last week. Probably to give herself time with him today. Got any surprises planned for me? She teased. I smiled. Maybe. She kissed me after dinner. Brushed my hand. Tried to start something more. But I told her I was too tired. She accepted it with a soft hum, pulled on her pajama pants, and curled up with a book. Friday morning came bright and cold. Lena slept in. I made her coffee, placed it on the nightstand, and waited for her to stretch and smile at me the way she always did. "Morning, birthday girl," I said. She yawned. "You didn't forget." "Never." At 9:02 a.m. She received a calendar reminder on her phone. "Clinic follow-up, canceled." She frowned. "Weird," she muttered. "I didn't put that in." At 9:06, the doorbell rang. She looked at me. "You expecting someone?" "No," I said, standing. "But you might be." At the door stood a courier with a brown padded envelope. Lena signed for it, puzzled. She opened it at the kitchen table while I watched, hands around my coffee mug. Inside was the USB stick. She stared at it, brow furrowed. "What is this?" "I don't know," I said. "Why don't you plug it in?" She hesitated, but curiosity won. I followed her to the den where she inserted the drive into our laptop. The file opened automatically. There she was, on screen, laughing, undressing, touching. His voice, her voice. Their conversation, clear as glass. Her body froze. The color drained from her face. The mouse slipped from her hand. I stepped forward, quiet, composed. "I know, Lena." She didn't speak. "I've known for a while," I said. "I've watched you lie to my face. And every time you smiled, every time you touched me, I wondered, how can someone be so good at pretending?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I leaned closer, voice steady. "I gave you every chance to tell me the truth. But you chose him. Over me. Over this family. Over everything we built." Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't. Stop." She did. I took a breath. "That drive has already been copied. Shared. The emails are ready. One click, and it all goes out." She gasped, hand over her mouth. "But I haven't sent them yet." Her eyes searched mine, desperate. "Please. I'll end it. I'll do anything." I didn't blink. "I don't want anything from you anymore." And then I walked out of the room. Upstairs, I retrieved my bag. Already packed. I left the house without a word. That afternoon, I booked a hotel. That evening, the kids were dropped back home. I called my lawyer. And that night, as Lena sat in the kitchen alone with a glass of wine in her shame, I sent the emails. All of them. It's been 93 days since I walked out that door. A little over 3 months, yet it feels like another lifetime. I sometimes wonder how I held myself together in those final moments. How I managed to speak so calmly as the world I'd built was quietly imploding from the inside out. Maybe it's easier than it sounds when you've been hollowed out over weeks. When your heartbreak turns into fuel. When you stop asking why and start asking how do I rebuild. The fallout came fast. By Monday, the emails had spread through her office like wildfire. The video link had been forwarded, reshared, downloaded, dissected. There was no context she could offer to soften what they'd seen. No story that painted her as anything but a woman who had turned her professional life into a cover for deceit. By Wednesday, Lena was suspended from her job, pending further review. They said, but we both knew what that meant. The firm couldn't afford the scandal, not with clients whispering and reputation on the line. By Friday, they issued a press statement. Termination due to violation of internal ethics policy. Her name never appeared in the release. But she vanished all the same. I didn't return home. I never intended to. I rented a townhouse across the city, a smaller place, quieter, more compact. Just me and the kids. I fought for custody with everything I had. And surprisingly, Lena didn't resist. Maybe guilt does strange things to people. Maybe shame made her weak. Or maybe the part of her that still loved our children knew they needed stability, and that didn't include a mother tangled in scandal. My lawyer made quick work of the divorce proceedings. Thanks to the clause in our prenuptial agreement. Infidelity voids claim to spousal support. Lena walked away with nothing but what she came into the marriage with. And Kenneth? He tried to vanish too. His clinic shut down 3 weeks after the emails. The licensing board launched an investigation. Multiple clients came forward, citing unprofessional behavior. At least one hinted at coercion. He moved states, according to the investigator's final note. Good. Let him rot in a city where no one knows his name, where he can replay the cost of arrogance in every mirror he passes. But for all the fire and fury of those first weeks, what lingered most was the quiet. The stillness that filled my new home when the kids were asleep. The silence that used to be filled with Lena's voice. Her laughter. Her presence. Her lies. I thought the revenge would feel like a high. And at first, it did. When the emails went out, when the truth lit the match that burned her life to the ground, There was a moment, fleeting but sharp, where I felt triumph. But it didn't last. It couldn't, because beneath the anger was something deeper. Grief. Not just for her, but for the man I was before I knew. The man who trusted, who believed. That version of me died the moment I found that second phone. The moment I pressed play on the recording and heard her whisper lies wrapped in laughter. I had to bury him quietly. Alone. Over time, the kids adjusted. They asked questions, but I kept the answers gentle. Mom and I are taking some time apart, I'd say. Is she okay? My daughter asked one night. She's figuring things out, I replied. But she still loves you very much. It wasn't a lie. Not exactly. But it wasn't the full truth either. That's something they'll understand when they're older. For now, they deserve peace. Routine. Comfort. Things Lena can't provide. She sees them once a week. Supervised at first. Now more freely, but still under court agreement. She brings them books, toys, promises. She tries to smile, but her eyes are hollow. Her voice unsure. The kids are kind to her. Children are more forgiving than we deserve. Last Sunday, Lena showed up unexpectedly. It was my weekend, and we were in the backyard, kicking a soccer ball around. She stood at the gate for a long moment before calling out. I froze when I saw her. She looked thinner. Not sick, just faded. Like a shadow of herself. Can I talk to you? She asked. I hesitated, then nodded. The kids ran inside. I walked over slowly. She didn't try to come closer. I don't expect anything, she said, voice low. I wanted to say sorry. Not for what you saw, but for everything before. For the way I lied. For how I made you feel. I didn't respond. She nodded, accepting the silence. I lost everything, she whispered. But I know I deserved it. Still, I said nothing. What was there to say? She looked up at me, eyes brimming. You didn't have to do it that way. But you were right to. I nodded once. Then I turned and went back inside. I don't think of her often now. Not with hate. Not with longing. Just absence. She's a chapter that ended. A lesson written in ash. And in her place, I found something unexpected. Clarity. I know who I am without her. I know what I want to build next, not from the wreckage of what was, but from something new, something mine. And if I ever love again, it will be with eyes wide open. No illusions. No masks. Only truth. Only peace.